This video contains mature themes which some viewers may find distressing. Expect descriptions of sexual abuse and sexual assault. Reynhard Tambos Marulito Sinaga is an Indonesian national born on the 19th of February 1983 in Jambi, Sumatra, but grew up in Depok, a city within the Jakarta metropolitan area. The oldest of three children of devout Catholic parents, Normawati Saline and Saiban Sinaga, a wealthy banker who owns several branches of a private bank, he graduated with a degree in architecture from the University of Indonesia in 2006. He is believed to have studied briefly at a university in America, but left because he felt that American university students were more interested in partying than studying. He arrived in Manchester on a student visa in 2007 and remained in the country on those terms for the next 10 years. He would earn 2 degrees from the University of Manchester, an MSc in Planning in 2009 and an MA in Sociology in 2011. In 2012, while living in Manchester, Sinaga began to undertake a PhD in Human Geography at the University of Leeds. His thesis, entitled Sexuality and Everyday Transnationalism among South Asian gay and bisexual men in Manchester, was submitted in August 2016 and was classified as a fail, though he was allowed to make the necessary corrections and resubmit it. Sinaga was gay and lived openly as a gay man in Manchester, where he is reported to have had many boyfriends. It was very different from his homeland of Indonesia, where homosexuality is deeply frowned upon, and even illegal in some states. He had a small but close circle of friends, who described him as kind, friendly and cheerful. One female friend said he had plenty of attention from gay men, thanks to his exotic appearance, though she said he liked masculine men. Other friends have reiterated that he had a fondness for straight men. Former university lecturers, however, have commented that Sinaga did not spend much time in Leeds, and that his work did not meet academic requirements. They have also said that he did not participate in research groups or societies. Unbeknownst to his family and friends, Reynard Sinaga lived a double life. He was a university student by day and a serial sexual predator by night. Beginning in 2015, though it's likely that Sinaga had begun offending many years earlier, he began prowling the streets in search of drunken young men, most of whom were heterosexual. Once he had found a victim, he would invite them to his city centre apartment to call a taxi, wait for friends, or even have another drink. When they returned to his apartment, he would offer them a drink that he had laced with GHB, the so-called date rape drug, rendering them unconscious for several hours. Sinaga would then rape and sexually assault the men multiple times over the next few hours, documenting the attacks on 2 mobile phones. He would also steal objects from the men, such as watches, mobile phones, driving licenses and passports, to keep as souvenirs. The men would wake up hours later, with no memory of what had happened and promptly leave, with some of them apologizing to Sinaga for imposing on him. Some would later befriend him on Facebook. Most of Sinaga's victims were university students, though there was also a chef, a personal trainer, and 2 members of the armed forces. All but 3 or 4 identify as heterosexual. Sinaga went undetected for over 2 years, that is, until the 2nd of June 2017. Shortly before 6 a.m, Sinaga's final victim, an 18-year-old rugby player, regained consciousness during the attack and fought him off, before calling the police. When police arrived at Montana House, they found Sinaga badly beaten, with a possible bleed on the brain, and rushed him to Manchester Royal Infirmary. The teenager was arrested on suspicion of grievous bodily harm. In the hospital, however, Sinaga began to arouse suspicion when he repeatedly asked for his mobile phone. Detective Inspector Matt Gregory, the first police officer to visit Sinaga in hospital, retrieved Sinaga's phone from Montana House and asked him to confirm the PIN number so that he could confirm that the phone was his. Sinaga provided a series of false passcodes before finally providing the correct number, at which point he tried to seize the phone from Gregory's hand. Gregory became increasingly suspicious and clicked on the Photos app. The last 3 thumbnails that appeared on the screen were of male genitalia. He watched one of the videos, which depicted a young male lying on the bedroom floor of Sinaga's apartment, whose trousers and underwear had been pulled down to his knees. A naked man, whom Gregory recognized as Sinaga, approached the young man and proceeded to sexually assault him. Sinaga was then arrested for rape. As he was arrested, he said, "I'm a terrible person." The teenager, arrested on suspicion of grievous bodily harm, then discovered that the phone in his back pocket was not his. It was actually Sinaga's second mobile phone. He handed it over to police, who found dozens of videos of young men being raped and sexually assaulted by Sinaga. The young man was then exonerated of any wrongdoing, as police were satisfied that he had simply been acting in self-defense. Greater Manchester Police began to mount what would be the largest rape investigation in the force's history. Detectives realised early on in the investigation that they were possibly dealing with a serial rapist. In videos obtained from Sinaga's phones, computers, and other external hard drives, police found 3.29 terabytes, the equivalent of 250 DVDs and 300,000 photographs, of graphic videos of dozens of unconscious men being raped and sexually assaulted by Sinaga. The victims could often be heard snoring loudly, while in other videos they could be seen vomiting while being attacked. But this did not stop Sinaga from continuing the attacks. As seen in his first police interview in the 2021 documentary, Catching a Predator, Sinaga flatly denied the rape accusation against him. He insisted that the teenager who had beaten him had in fact instigated the sexual contact, and that they had had consensual sex. But detectives had already seen the footage on Sinaga's phone, and did not believe his version of events. He began crying during the interview, but detectives believed it was merely an attempt to gain sympathy. As one detective commented, "Until you've met Reynhard Sinaga, you won't realise the level of manipulation that he has." She also stated, "I don't believe his tears were because of what he saw in front of him. I believe it was just another attempt to make out that he was the victim that people didn't believe." As the investigation, now known as Operation Island, gathered momentum, detectives were able to identify victims using stolen bank cards, passports, driving licenses, and by analysing hundreds of hours of graphic videos, and the snapshots of their Facebook pages that Sinaga had taken. Some of the men were assaulted multiple times over the course of several hours. One assault lasted for 8 hours, while another man was raped 8 times over 14 hours. On one occasion, Sinaga alternated between 2 men in his apartment. As soon as officers had made a positive identification, they had the unenviable job of informing dozens of unsuspecting young men that they had been raped. Officers would be accompanied by support workers from St. Mary's Sexual Assault Referral Centre. Lisa Waters, one of these support workers, said there were many different reactions. Some were emotional, some were emotionless, some were angry, and some were confused. Unfortunately, some of the victims contemplated suicide. Because of the sheer number of victims, and because Sinaga pleaded not guilty to all 159 charges against him, the case had to be split into 4 separate trials, each with a separate jury, and each with different victims. The first trial lasted between June the 1st and July the 10th, 2018. The second between April the 1st and May the 19th, 2029. The third between September the 16th and October the 4th, 2019. And the fourth between December the 2nd and December the 20th, 2019. During the first trial, Sinaga was convicted of 31 counts of rape, 3 counts of attempted rape, and 6 counts of sexual assault. The second trial saw him convicted of 49 counts of rape, 5 counts of attempted rape, and 1 count of sexual assault. He was imprisoned for 20 years, following his first 2 trials. The third saw Sinaga convicted of 26 counts of rape, 1 count of assault by penetration, and 5 counts of sexual assault. During the fourth and final trial, he was convicted of 30 counts of rape and 2 counts of sexual assault. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, following his final 2 trials. Because Sinaga pleaded not guilty to all charges, the victims were forced to watch the horrifying videos of their ordeal. Only the judge and the jurors could see the videos. Those who witnessed Sinaga during the trials believed he enjoyed forcing his victims and the juries to watch the videos. He was often seen smiling during court proceedings and tried to engage in banter and jokes with the court staff before the start of sessions. He insisted that all of the sexual activity had been consensual, and that each man was simply pretending to be asleep while being filmed. The videos and the victims, however, told a very dark and different story. Many of the victims in the videos could be heard snoring loudly while being attacked. In one video, a man's mobile phone rang, but the man did not stir at all. One man lay motionless on the floor for 37 minutes, and could be heard snoring loudly. Some made feeble attempts to push Sinaga away, but were unable to do so. In other videos, the men could be seen vomiting during the assaults. Sinaga maintained this defense throughout his trials, but all 4 juries saw through his lies, and on the 6th of January 2020, Reynhard Sinaga was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years. Prosecutors had hoped that the judge would pass a whole life term, which, to date, has not been imposed for a crime other than murder. In total, Sinaga was convicted of 136 counts of rape, 14 counts of sexual assault, 8 counts of attempted rape, and 1 count of assault by penetration. The presiding judge, Suzanne Goddard QC, had contemplated passing a whole life order, saying, "The sole feature that would allow the court to contemplate the passing of a whole life order would be the vast scale of your offending, which now involves 48 victims. This is, in my view, a borderline case, as described in the authorities, and as such, I must therefore shrink back from passing a whole life order." Addressing Sinaga during his 4th and final trial, she told him, "You are an evil serial sexual predator who has preyed upon young men who, for the most part, came into the city centre wanting nothing more than a good night out with their friends. Again during this trial, you have shown not a jot of remorse for your actions, and at times you seem to be actively enjoying the trial process. Your actions show that you are a dangerous, deeply disturbed and perverted individual with no sense of reality." Because he denied any responsibility for the attacks, Sinaga has never explained his motives, although prosecutor Ian Rushton believed that Sinaga had an extreme sense of sexual entitlement and that he took a particular pleasure in preying on heterosexual men. Police identified at least 195 victims, but this is only over the course of 2 years between January 2015 and June 2017. Rushton has stated that there are likely many more men out there who may or may not be aware that they were victimized by Sinaga. Taking into account that Sinaga had been living in the United Kingdom since 2007, it's likely that the true number of victims is many times higher than 195. Sinaga was initially detained in HMP Manchester, better known as Strangeways, before being relocated to HMP Wakefield in February 2020. Following his final trial, Sinaga's father, Saiban Sinaga, told BBC Indonesia that his son got what he deserved, and that his punishment fit the crimes. Sinaga's mother, Normawati Saline, told the same media outlet, "We are a good Christian family who do not believe in homosexuality. He is my baby." She also believed that Sinaga's final victim made up the story about having been raped. After Sinaga's conviction, the mayor of his hometown of Depok announced that he intended to order raids on the city's LGBT community, but this was condemned by human rights activists on the ground that he was using Sinaga's crimes as an excuse to target the gay community in Indonesia. The charity Safeline revealed that they had received an increase in calls to its hotline for male survivors of sexual abuse in the aftermath of the case. Geoffrey Cox, then Attorney General, insisted that Sinaga's sentence should have been a full life sentence, meaning his crimes were so serious that he would never be released from prison. On the 11th of December 2020, 11 months into his sentence, Sinaga's prison term was increased from 30 years to 40 years by the Court of Appeals. At around the same time, Greater Manchester Police announced that they had identified a further 11 victims, bringing the known total number of victims to 206. None of the newly identified victims have supported future prosecutions and are satisfied with the increase in Sinaga's sentence. Police have urged young men who suspect that they may have been attacked by Sinaga to come forward and to get the help and support that they need. As stated previously, Sinaga is detained in HMP Wakefield and will not be eligible for parole until 2060, when he will be 77 years old. He has never given any explanation as to why he drugged and raped dozens of heterosexual men. Maybe in the future he will be willing to talk and finally explain his motives. Until then, however, only Sinaga has the answers to the many questions that remain unanswered.